It is an image that has stunned the diplomatic world, confused historians, and sent shockwaves through the halls of the Nobel Institute in Oslo. On January 15, 2026, a transaction took place in Palm Beach, Florida, that redefined the boundaries of political protocol. It wasn't a trade deal, it wasn't a treaty, and it wasn't a standard diplomatic exchange. It was a transfer of prestige. For decades, Donald Trump has made no secret of his desire for the ultimate global accolade. He has chased it, demanded it, and raged against the unfairness of being denied it. But yesterday, after a tumultuous week involving a threatened military strike on Venezuela and a desperate diplomatic summit, Donald Trump finally got what he wanted. Not from the Norwegian committee, but from the hands of the woman who actually won it. This is the story of the crisis of January 2026, the obsession of a president, and the moment Corina Machado decided that the only way to save her country was to give up her greatest honor to the man who held her nation's fate in his hands. To understand the surreal events of this week, we have to go back. We have to understand the psychology of the prize. For Donald Trump, the Nobel Peace Prize has never been just a medal. It has been a symbol of the elite validation he felt he was constantly denied. We remember the rallies in 2020, where he openly complained about Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed winning the award. He claimed he had saved a country, he had made a deal, and yet the accolades went elsewhere. He harbored a deep resentment over Barack Obama's 2009 win, viewing it as a premature coronation by a European establishment that despised him. When the Abraham Accords were signed, normalizing relations between Israel and several Arab nations, Trump's expectation for the prize reached a fever pitch. When he didn't win, the grievance became a permanent fixture of his rhetoric. He viewed the Nobel Committee not as an impartial arbiter of peace, but as a political gatekeeper standing between him and his rightful place in history. Fast forward to late 2025. Donald Trump had returned to the world stage. His foreign policy remained transactional, aggressive, and centered entirely on personal relationships. Meanwhile, in South America, a different kind of story was unfolding. Venezuela was at a breaking point. The regime of Nicolás Maduro, clinging to power despite losing legitimacy years prior, was finally cracking. Leading the charge was María Corina Machado. Known as the Iron Lady of the opposition, she had unified a fractured movement. She had survived assassination attempts, travel bans, and the seizure of her assets. In October 2025, the Norwegian Nobel Committee made their announcement. They awarded the Nobel Peace Prize to Machado for her nonviolent struggle for democracy and human rights in the face of authoritarian oppression. The world applauded. It was a classic Nobel choice, validating a struggle for freedom, but in Mar-a-Lago, the reaction was reportedly icy. Sources close to Trump suggested he felt slighted yet again. He had been ramping up maximum pressure on Venezuela, claiming his sanctions were the real reason the regime was weak. In his mind, Machado was benefiting from the pressure he applied. He believed the architect of the pressure deserved the credit, not the beneficiary of the result. The tension simmered until the first week of January 2026. What happened next is a blur of military maneuvering and brinkmanship that historians will likely debate for decades. We know it now as the Caribbean standoff. Intelligence reports leaked to the press indicated that remaining loyalists within the Venezuelan military, sensing the end was near, were planning a massive crackdown, a scorched earth campaign to eliminate the opposition leadership, including Machado. On January 8th, Trump responded in characteristic fashion. He didn't call the UN. He didn't issue a joint statement with the EU. He took to social media and announced that any attack on the Venezuelan opposition would be met with fire, fury, and unparalleled magnitude. Simultaneously, the U.S. Southern Command began a massive mobilization. This wasn't just posturing. Reports confirmed that Tomahawk missile destroyers were moved into strike positions off the coast of La Guaira. The rhetoric was violent. The world held its breath. This was the Venezuela attack scenario analysts had feared, a direct U.S. military intervention in South America. For 3 days, the world stood on the precipice of war. Machado, trapped in Caracas, was effectively a hostage of the situation. But then, on January 12th, the pivot happened. Trump announced he had spoken to the regime generals. He offered them a way out, exile and safety, or total destruction. The regime blinked. The generals stood down. The attack became a rescue. Trump immediately claimed credit for preventing World War III. He took to Truth Social, declaring that he had solved Venezuela and that no one else could do it. But there was a catch. The transition of power was fragile. The U.S. needed to formally recognize the new government, and financial aid needed to flow immediately to prevent anarchy. Machado needed Trump's full, unwavering endorsement. She needed him to feel like the hero of the story, and she knew exactly what he wanted. She understood that to secure the future of her nation, she had to navigate the ego of the American president. On January 15, 2026, Maria Corina Machado flew to Florida. It was her first foreign trip as the recognized leader of a free Venezuela. She didn't go to the United Nations in New York. She didn't go to the White House in D.C. She went to Mar-a-Lago. The optics were carefully managed. Trump wanted a coronation. Machado wanted survival for her nation. Reporters were kept outside the main ballroom for the initial talks. But leaks suggest the conversation was heavily one-sided. Trump recounted the naval maneuvers, detailing the weaponry he almost used. He reportedly told Machado that while they gave her the medal, he was the one who saved her life. He was the one who stopped the attack. It was the moment Machado had prepared for. She is a pragmatist. She understands power. She realized that to Donald Trump, the Nobel Peace Prize held by someone else was an insult, but the Nobel Peace Prize in his possession was the ultimate validation. When the press was finally invited in, the atmosphere was electric. Trump stood at the podium declaring a beautiful victory, framing the liberation of Venezuela entirely through the lens of American strength. Machado stood beside him looking tired but resolute. She spoke of freedom, of the suffering of her people, and then she reached under the podium and produced a leather box. She told the president that the world recognizes those who dream of peace, but history remembers those who enforce it. She said the medal was given to her for the hope of Venezuela, but that hope does not stop tanks. Strength stops tanks. And then, in a moment of pure, unadulterated political theater, she offered him the medal. She told him it belonged to the peace he secured. The room went silent. The flashbulbs erupted. Machado opened the box. The gold medal, featuring the profile of Alfred Nobel, caught the chandelier light. Trump's face, usually guarded or combative, broke into a look of genuine, stunned delight. He didn't refuse, he didn't demur, he took it. The image of Donald Trump holding Maria Corina Machado's Nobel Peace Prize is now the defining image of 2026, but the aftermath has been chaotic. Trump gave an impromptu acceptance speech right there in the ballroom. He called it a great honor when he should have had a long time ago. He accepted it on behalf of himself and the country, explicitly stating that he did what no one else could do. He held the medal up for the cameras. He posed with it. He reportedly asked aides if he could wear it, though the Nobel medal does not come with a ribbon for wearing. For Trump, the circle was closed. The desperation that had gnawed at him for years, the feeling that the elites in Europe were withholding his due, was resolved. He didn't need their vote. He had conquered the winner. It was a feudal transfer of tribute. In his worldview, this was better than winning it directly. He had taken it from the winner by virtue of being more powerful. But if the mood in Florida was jubilant, the mood in Oslo was catatonic. The Norwegian Nobel Committee is an institution steeped in rigid tradition. The prize is not property in the traditional sense. It is a spiritual and historical designation. By the morning of January 16th, the committee released a statement. It was terse, reflecting their absolute bewilderment. They clarified that the Nobel Peace Prize is awarded to specific individuals for specific contributions. It is not a transferable asset. They stated that while Ms. Machado is free to do what she wishes with the physical gold medal, the title of Nobel laureate remains hers alone. They used the word stunned. Legal scholars immediately began debating the implications. Can you give away a Nobel Prize? Physically, yes. The gold is worth roughly $10,000 in raw material, but its symbolic value is incalculable. But does possessing the medal make Trump a Nobel laureate? To Trump, the answer is obviously yes. His campaign website was updated within hours. The bio now reads, Donald J. Trump, recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize medal. Note the wording. He isn't claiming the committee voted for him. He is claiming the medal. The media reaction has been polarized, violent, and fascinating. Bloomberg reported this morning that the gift has secured Venezuela an immediate $5 billion aid package and the lifting of all remaining sanctions. By stroking the ego of the American president, Machado secured the future of her economy. It was perhaps the most expensive gift in history, but the return on investment was astronomical. Other outlets have called it the death of satire, arguing that Trump accepting the medal represents the final collapse of diplomatic norms, treating the Nobel Prize like a championship belt to be won in the ring. But inside the Trump camp, there is a sense of vindication. They believe the liberal establishment in Europe would never have given him the prize, no matter what he achieved. In their eyes, Machado's gift bypasses the gatekeepers. It is a populist Nobel. We must look closer at the psychology of this transfer. Why did Machado do it? It wasn't just gratitude, it was insurance. She knows that Donald Trump is transactional. By giving him the prize, she has bound him to her nation's success. If Venezuela fails now, it's not just her failure, it's the failure of the Nobel holder Donald Trump. She has made him a stakeholder in her democracy. If he lets the country collapse, he tarnishes his own trophy. It was a masterstroke of manipulation wrapped in the guise of submission. And for Trump, it validates his entire worldview. He believes that strength is the only currency that matters. He believes that peace is not achieved through committees and dialogue, but through the threat of overwhelming force. To him, the medal is proof that his method works. The European capitals are in dismay. Leaders in France and the UK have struggled to respond, caught between the absurdity of the event and the reality that Trump effectively stabilized a volatile region. Meanwhile, in Moscow and Beijing, the silence is deafening, likely masking amusement at the degradation of Western institutions. Trump's acceptance of the regifted prize validates the cynicism of authoritarian regimes who view these awards as political theater. But perhaps the most profound shift is in the meaning of the prize itself. We are living in an era where institutions are crumbling under the weight of personality cults. The Nobel Peace Prize, once a sacred cow of international relations, has been reduced to a bargaining chip in a geopolitical shakedown. Machado's calculation was brutal, but brilliant. She traded a piece of gold for the security of her nation. She recognized that the symbol meant more to Trump than it did to her. She already had the recognition of history. She needed the protection of the present. For Donald Trump, the medal is a trophy. It sits now, presumably, on a shelf in Mar-a-Lago, perhaps next to a golf trophy or a magazine cover. He finally has it. He finally beat the system. As we look forward to the rest of 2026, the question remains, will the Nobel Committee change their rules? Will other leaders start gifting their awards to curry favor? For now, only one thing is certain. The history books will record that in 2025, María Corina Machado won the Nobel Peace Prize, but they will also have to record that in 2026, Donald Trump took it home. It is the ultimate deal, the art of the deal manifested in solid gold. Trump got the glory, Machado got her country back, and the Nobel Committee got a headache that will last a generation. This event forces us to confront the reality of modern diplomacy. It is no longer about protocols and treaties. It is about the personal dynamics of leaders. The Caribbean standoff was not resolved by the UN Security Council. It was resolved by a threat on social media and a private meeting in a Florida club. The awarding of the Peace Prize was not decided by a committee in Norway, but by a transaction in Palm Beach. In this new world, symbols are fluid. Truth is negotiable, and the highest honors are available to those with the leverage to demand them. Donald Trump has spent a lifetime putting his name on buildings, on stakes, on universities. Now, in a way that defies all convention, he has put his name on the Nobel Peace Prize. Whether one views this as a masterstroke of statecraft or a farce of historic proportions, the result is the same. The medal is in his hands. And in the mind of Donald Trump, possession is 10/10 of the law. The saga of the golden transaction will be studied for years. It serves as a perfect microcosm of the Trump era. Chaotic, unprecedented, obsessed with image, and yet, in its own strange way, consequential. The threat of war was real. The mobilization of the Navy was real. And the peace that followed, however fragile, is real. Machado understood that to secure that peace, she had to feed the hunger that drove the American president. She saw the void where the Nobel Prize should have been in his self-image, and she filled it. It was a sacrifice of vanity for the sake of survival. As the sun sets on this bizarre chapter of history, we are left with the image of the two of them, the revolutionary and the tycoon, bound together by a small gold disc. It is a reminder that in the high-stakes game of geopolitics, everyone has a price and everyone has a prize. For Machado, the prize was Venezuela. For Trump, the prize was the prize itself. And in the end, they both got exactly what they wanted.